Akamai recently commissioned two studies, one targeting IT leaders and the other focused on developers. The study found that IT decision makers are expected to increase their use of distributed cloud services over the next 12 months, with more than one third saying that benefits of distributed clouds are mission critical to their IT strategy. The developer focus survey found that more than half were already using distributed cloud services in some capacity during their deployment. We saw a very good alignment between IT decision makers and developers in terms of the top use cases for distributed cloud. But what is driving this adoption of distributed cloud? What challenges do developers face when they embrace distributed cloud? How do they deal with issues like security? How do they perceive emergence of generative AI as a critical technology? Today, we are going to deep dive into these studies and find which direction the wind is blowing. Let's talk to Liam Dodd, data storyteller at SlashData, and John Garrett, founder and partner of ClearPath Strategies. John, Liam, it's great to have you both on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll start with Liam.
So our study, which was on the developer perceptions of distributed cloud, was focusing on interviewing professional cloud developers and those who work in cloud infrastructure. We interviewed more than 700, and we found that actually over half of developers are already using some level of distributed cloud, and the interest in distributed cloud among those not using it is among 2/3 of clients using in the future. So there's a very high interest in distributed cloud as well.
John, talk about your study with Akamai.
Sure. Yeah, we found something very similar to what Liam found with the ITDMs. Our study, which we described in more detail in a report we developed with Akamai called Distributed Cloud Technology Next Act. We interviewed 425 ITDMs across 15 geos, mostly C-suite, IT leadership, directors, and the like. And just as Liam said, we see a lot of folks turning to ITDMs and organizations turning to distributed cloud, and we called it Technology's Next Act because digital transformation, as you know, is an evolutionary process, not just a one-off, we've adopted public-private cloud, we're done, call it a day. And our research shows that distributed cloud is part of that evolution, that next step in the evolution as evolutionary pressures continue and companies run into limitations with their current centralized cloud infrastructure.
Now let's talk about distributed cloud. Of course, when we look at the Akamai audience, it goes, security, CDN, and now with the linear acquisition, cloud as well. So we are looking at audience which is like highly skilled, and then we also look at individual developers. When we look at distributed cloud, how do you folks look at it? And when you are conducting the studies, what kind of perception is there? Because when we look at cloud, we look at, hey, one place which is far from the users, but it solves all your problem. So when we look at distributed, sometimes we also confuse distributed with decentralized. So I just want to get some clarity around this term itself.
We use the definition, because distributed cloud is also a term which is like still going through an understanding. So we kind of had to pick a phrasing that would allow developers to kind of assess their kind of understanding of what we were saying. So we use some definition to the effect of distributed cloud refers to cloud infrastructure and services that are decentralized and distributed across geographic regions to kind of encompass the kind of major impacts and importance when we ask developers to think about distributed cloud.
We did the same thing as Liam, naturally, as you'd expect. We share an understanding. So distributed cloud, the way we view it and the way we described it to the ITDMs in our study is we described it as putting the resources and services physically closer to the data source, to the user, or both, while still being managed centrally.
When we talk about cloud, it can mean a lot of things, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Even you can have a native cloud like, portable infrastructure within your data center as well. But what is kind of either driving the interest or driving the actual move towards distributed cloud? What are the factors?
So we found that the kind of two major ones were improving latency for user experience. That was the primary motivation of developers. And with the second most likely one being the ability to flexibly scale at different geographic locations, which again is a very much kind of focused ability of distributed cloud. After that, we found that the ability to handle data-intensive applications, and the ability to possibly cost optimize were the third and fourth most likely drivers of developer interest in distributed cloud.
In our study, we saw 7 out of 10 ITDMs plan to increase usage of distributed cloud over the next 12 months, and why. So I called it an evolutionary process earlier, at risk of greatly oversimplifying and annoying my scientifically inclined colleagues. It's an adaptive process, and ITDMs are adapting. Their environment changes, their needs evolve, software architecture changes, explosion of data, the rapid maturation of GenAI, increasingly complex security challenges, all of these things with the backdrop of rising cloud costs and cloud pressures. And so the very growth that enabled their success through centralized cloud now requires something more specialized, decentralized, but also distributed cloud. This is where distributed cloud plays the role of, as we like to see, force multiplier on top of their so-called traditional cloud. They're adding infrastructure, they're adding distributed cloud infrastructure to their current footprint to maximize effect, to reduce latency, as Liam said, to increase value to customer, to reduce cost. And our survey shows us the number one priority for ITDMs is reducing costs, right ahead of doing more with AI/ML, leveraging more value from data. But the same survey shows the number one tipping point. So you talk about drivers, the number one tipping point that pushes ITDMs over the edge and says, okay, I do want to explore and adopt distributed cloud is being able to address their security challenges.
Actually, I love when you said the traditional cloud. Cloud is becoming a legacy in traditional cloud.
Yeah. Can we even say that?
No, I think I love that. That might become a very good, just a point there. Since you just brought up the point of security, I also want to let's just go a bit deeper and talk about, since you also use the term traditional cloud, what are the, because we started talking about security, reliability more in the cloud era, because it's no longer an afterthought that we see in traditional IT setups. You have to start thinking about security from the beginning. We talk about reliability a lot, SREs, platform engineering, all the teams. So when we look at distributed cloud, what kind of impact it has on security and reliability? Does it kind of empower teams to kind of improve those practices, or there are some struggles there?
Security is actually the number two concern for developers. The number one concern is the cost of implementation, obviously, because we live in a world of data egress costs and all these sort of things. If you have a platform-centric view of cloud development, then the idea of distributed cloud is staring you down with, there could be costs attached to this that could spiral if you have a platform-centric view of cloud development. The security is the number two challenge that they view, but also the developers kind of are imagining a future where they want to see improvements made to security tools and practices and standards that will empower them to use distributed cloud. So it's like the highest ranked standard they want, it's the highest ranked improvement to cloud tools they want. And so for them, it's like, we need security to be better to make this more viable for us. But on the opposite side, when it comes to reliability, unlike, I think, ITDMs, developers aren't viewing reliability as the reason to go distributed cloud. They're viewing it as, we just expect it to be reliable. Like, we just expect it to be reliable, and if it's not reliable, then that's kind of not helping us do all the interesting things we want to do. So I think there's a different perception where developers are looking at like kind of the possible compute abilities or the kind of benefits to like their development processes, rather than looking at like service improvements. So yeah.
And we saw something very similar, but as Liam's saying, from a different perspective, right? So for the ITDMs, reducing costs is the number one priority, but security, as I mentioned earlier, is the number one tipping point. So in our surveys, we ask similar questions from different angles to explore the nuance. And what pushes people, ITDMs, over the edge on distributed cloud to adoption is security. Security, to your question, has gotten very complex. It's more complex as software architecture changes, workload segmented apps. The security surface area is simultaneously getting larger, right? Organizations need solutions, and ITDMs are thinking about security challenges, and they're finding a solution in distributed cloud. And according to our study, what we see from ITDMs is 71% of them report better visibility into security issues locally. 66% report greater granular control over data and access to resources. 58%, to Liam's point, report redundancy and failover capabilities across multiple locations. So reliability is there as well. It's not an afterthought, but it's almost secondary, security being primary.
When we do look at cloud, of course, cloud becomes opinionated depending on whose cloud you're using, and there is no like single cloud as we discussed earlier. Do developers also want to have more control over things versus going with a lot of opinionated solutions that cloud vendors provide? At the same time, sometimes as you talk about ingress cost as well, data gravity is also a big challenge there. So when you're doing this research, security, reliability, but what about more control, more ownership?
So as I mentioned previously, that the improved security tools is the number one thing that developers say needs to be improved for them to like fully embrace distributed cloud. However, I think it's about 35% of developers say that. Only 40% of them say that the infrastructure providers should be the ones providing these security tools, which to me shows this slight break from the platform-centric view where they're saying, I want you to give me a backbone and I will find the best tools in the industry and I will use the best tools. So just give me the freedom and I will do like the best job that I think matches. And then when you get into things like compliance and regulation, I think there's going to be like specific needs for specific kind of tools that means like a greater empowerment of developers and then obviously organizations to do what is best for them with the infrastructure provided.
I actually can't really add to that. I think Liam said it perfectly. Our study, this specific study, didn't delve deeply into that, but just to echo Liam's comments from other work we've done, developers and the security challenges they face, as it becomes increasingly complex, they're looking for best tool to do the job. With providing maximum control, but so that it allows them the freedom again to go back to job number one, which is to develop and focus on the software itself. Even as we shift left with more and more of the security features or security requirements and testing, falling on the shoulders of developers, they want to have the control over that, but also get away from it as quickly as possible.
When we look at security, sometimes it's seen as developers don't like to talk to security teams. They slow things down, they stop things. But if we put proper security, as you're saying, they expect the proper security guardrails, not gates around them. It actually enables them to actually walk freely. It gives them the freedom to write business application in a better way without having to worry about it. So we always look at security as a scary thing, but it could actually make teams more efficient also if we just look at it from a right perspective.
The general approach that kind of developers have, as you mentioned, is that like security has gone from being like a thing which people have processes to now there's like all-encompassing part of the software development lifecycle. Like the entire software supply chain is now vulnerabilities and issues and various like places for nebulous actors to act on you. And obviously distributed cloud introduces a much larger surface area for you to like face risks and face challenges. And obviously an interoperable environment where you're using mix and matching tools best for your services, again, increases the ability. Like if you're using open source software, how are you validating and authenticating the services you're using? Are you scanning things, checking for new vulnerabilities? So while we didn't cover it fully within the scope of this survey, it's going to be a major concern. Like the surface area is a concern the developer have to think about. But as new processes are developed, new kind of ideas are standardized, and new approaches that are standardized, we think that there's like in general improvement that once developers establish like automated, thorough, well-documented and well-stored like security practices, then it becomes less of a concern for them. So that might also be what they're looking for in security tools. If the tool does everything for me, or at least gives me a traceable ability to see what's gone wrong, then I can do whatever I want. I have so much more freedom that way. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, just to echo Liam, while we didn't focus on this in our study, so I'm a bit outside the scope of the study, but from the ITDM perspective, right, the business is saying, okay, we do need our developers to focus more on security at some point, and the preference is, this is all shift left, right? The preference is we do it up front and we spend a little bit of time, or we don't do it up front and we lose this developer or this developer team for 2 months down the road to, fixing problems that we could have caught earlier. And so what is the solution here? The solution is more automation tools, or increasingly more AI, more GenAI integrated, augmented, pick your word du jour, in the security effort up front from developers as things shift left to alleviate the burden of developers who businesses don't want focusing on security but currently have to.
Since you use the magic word there, generative AI, in this study, did you also talk about anything related to generative AI, how that can either, you're talking ITDM teams or developers can help them, or it was once again not discussed at this point?
We asked about the best use cases that these organizations imagine for distributed cloud. And for us, it was big data and analytics, which is number one. Obviously, big data, it's the world of the tomorrow, it's the world of now, basically. It's going to be the big thing. For us, the second one was actually real-time applications, but I think that might have been based on the industries that were like very prevalent in our like kind of surveys. And then the third one was AI and ML. Also, this was before AI and ML was the kind of guarantee for a unicorn. The survey was done like just as we were kind of all beginning to appreciate like what generative AI is going to mean for the future. So yeah, the survey was slightly ahead of like everyone pivoting and realizing this is going to change the world in ways we could not imagine. But yeah, AI and ML, even at that stage, were the third most popular use case for us.
I was going to say we had the benefit of going second. So while Liam's survey was right as things were becoming apparent and headlines were being made around GenAI, ours followed. Our first use case. So as ITDMs say, why are you going to distributed cloud? What are the primary use cases for distributed cloud? ITDMs are saying, number one, as the developers are saying in Liam's study, number one, big data analytics, because we are in the decade of data or what have you, however we want to describe that, but that it is, data first. Whether it's GenAI leveraging that or not, it comes to data first. Big data analytics, 56% of ITDMs say their organizations are using it for big data analytics, decentralized cloud, or distributed cloud for that. AI/ML came second. 47% of ITDMs say they're using distributed cloud for this, and then real-time apps in our survey was third. Which is so basically anything that if we're talking about use cases for distributed cloud, it's anything that requires processing mass amounts of data quickly and efficiently.
And if we look at ITDMs or developers teams, how much you think that based on the survey, the finding that developers should be also aware of what business we are in, the business value of the things they're doing. At the same time, ITDM teams, they're also kind of aware of developers' pain point. I'm like, what are the bridges there, or how wide is the valley there?
I have two thoughts on this. The first thought was, as you're talking, I have this vision from Office Space back in the day. Is this good for the company? That banner. And so on the one hand, developers, they just want to develop something cool or play with new technology that's exciting to them, or advance their career depending on their perspectives. On the other hand, of course, they are thinking, how does this achieve whatever goal that has been set out. ITDMs are aware of that. ITDMs do want to create a better developer experience, and those things I just described, giving developers freedom to create, giving them more control, to Liam's point earlier, giving them access to play with more new cool things. Those are what developers want. That tends to create a better developer experience. Things that create a worse developer experience, when they have less of those things. But then also, when there's more process or more breakage in the pipeline. Those are the things that ITDMs are focused on. And so where infrastructure comes into play when we're talking about distributed cloud or what have you, where that comes into play is just not overburdening developers, not making them do too many things that are either boring and can be automated away from a developer's perspective, or that can be burdensome, or that frankly just that it's out of their scope, out of their skill set, which is something that ITDMs are very focused on, the skill set of their teams.
One of the emergence of the current platform environment is that it's made cloud developers much more aware of the business implications of their actions than I think would previously existed. Like if you had a mainframe, no one was telling you how much electricity you were spending or how much power you were consuming. It just was like a thing that existed and may occasionally had issues. Anyone who works with big cloud providers is aware that you can see your bill rising as you do things. You're very, very much aware of how much things cost, what the impact of these are. You get latency numbers consistently fed to you. You can track a lot of business needs are now fed directly to developers. What I think is happening is, even though we don't see the kind of business cases as the primary thing that developers mention, it's always right there near the top. So we have cost optimization as a second concern, because obviously ITDMs are we want to lower costs, and developers are yeah, but I know what happens if we don't do this correctly and we just have a cost spiral out of nowhere. So I think that developers are thinking, especially cloud developers, are thinking in a much more business bridged way. It's just whether they are given the space to carry on doing what they think is interesting alongside of like considering business like requirements or business benefits.
As you're working on these, study surveys, we have come along, from the traditional IT, traditional cloud. But what are still some of the pain points that developers still face despite, cloud making things easier? There's a very big cloud native ecosystem out there of vendors. There are a lot of open source technologies out there. But where you see, hey, these are still a lot of things that keeps developer awake at night. There are still some of the pain points that they feel should just go away. What are those, if there are any?
I think it's data egress costs. I think data. We live in a data world, and I think it's the thing that very much plagues developers in cloud, like how to work with the amount of data required, where it needs to be, how it has to be used, processed, and stuff. I think that's a huge thing, which I think both my study and John's found like this is a big motivation for looking at distributed clouds.
Now, if you look at both of these kind of studies, research, what kind of conclusion we can draw? And if you can also share, of course, you folks did touch upon a lot of use cases where we can see that, when we look at this decentralized approach, is this the kind of future? Is it specific for only certain use cases, certain industries? Or once again, as we talk about a lot of things from the old time, these become new norm. This becomes the right way to approach when we look at cloud and infrastructure.
So I think that innovations in software development and infrastructure kind of live and die by whether they are effective, useful, and convenient for developers to achieve their goals. Obviously, there's business interests, but if developers are not satisfied using them, then these processes or innovations fall away. So I think while the most unique and revolutionary features of distributed cloud, like localized compute, are like obviously very key, developers moving to distributed cloud, they need to see reduced latency, greater ease for scaling, and increased capability for handling these data-intensive processes, because that's what's drawing them to it. So we need to have that be supported before we encourage like the kind of true like revolutionary and unique concepts in distributed cloud. Developers obviously have a lot of concerns about costs and security. So like anyone looking at providing infrastructure should be aware that these are where developers' concerns exist. And then I think a final thing, which I think will become more apparent in the future, we are yet to see, is I think there's going to be the emergence of industry-specific like services and frameworks, because within different industries, there are like quite different regulatory and compliance requirements, which can lead to different requirements. So like someone in fintech has an incredibly different approach to service level agreement, security, reliability, response rates, compared to someone who works, say, like in marketing, who just does lots and lots of data at a distance. So I think we'll see different responses and catering of specific industries, because I think that is where the real power of distributed cloud coming in, with this ability to create very customized, unique, and modular systems that match the very specific needs of various developers in their industries.
So coming from the ITDM perspective, echoing, but from a different direction, once again, distributed cloud, so if I'm making predictions, which obviously is a fraught territory, but I make one that I think is pretty safe, distributed cloud is going to become more mission critical for more organizations in the next few years. And why do I say that? Why am I comfortable with that? So when we look at the data from our survey, we look at ITDMs at organizations where distributed cloud is already, as they say, mission critical. They're reporting significant benefits, sometimes double the benefits compared to their colleagues who are just starting out with distributed cloud, dabbling with it or maybe using it on the margins. And what are the benefits they're seeing? They're seeing reduced costs, they're seeing increased security, they're seeing increased customer satisfaction. By every measure, significant benefits, sometimes as much as double or more. And these are the ITDMs, these orgs, these ITDMs of these orgs, they're going to continue to enjoy success. They've figured out how to address the challenges that Liam's talking about. As a friend of mine says, the winners are winning, and so look at what they're doing, right? And distributed cloud is a key component of their winning. That's what they're doing. They're winning as we evolve into technology's next act, because they're using distributed cloud and they're addressing their primary challenges on cost, on security, and on delivering value to customers.
Liam, John, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about this research studies. Thank you so much for great insights. And as usual, I would love to talk to you folks again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holm. This is great. I appreciate it.